Hello, everyone, and welcome to the real estate market analysis for Morgan Hill, California for October of 2023. This is where we take a few minutes out of the day to review what's happened in October or in any month. This month happens to be October, and see where we are, where we've been, and if we might be able to anticipate where we're going in the real estate market here in Morgan Hill. And we might, along the way, give it a little context compared to this county in general and other neighboring communities. So let's go ahead and jump in. But before we do, let me introduce myself. My name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker in Silicon Valley. Been doing this since 1988, so I've got quite a bit of experience under the belt. Areas ranging all the way from Palo Alto down to Gilroy over to Los Gatos and up to northern San Jose and even up into Milpitas. So if you have any questions or you want someone to chat with about your goals, feel free to reach out to me, whether you're looking to buy, sell, or invest. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. Take a look at these active listings. We can see that the active listings for Morgan Hill are at 55 for October of 2023. And before we get too far into these numbers, let me explain the layout you're looking at. On the right-hand side, you can see the October of 2023 is right next to October of 2022. The reason is so just visually you can easily get a year-over-year comparison of what happened a year ago versus what's happening today. But at the same time, you can then look back and see what the trend has been over previous months. So with that out of the way, we can see we've had a 31% decline in the total number of active listings. And when we think about active listings, simply think about the total inventory. How many homes did buyers have to choose from? And how many homes did sellers have to compete against to get attention on their home? And so this number, again, is down 31%. And if we take the total inventory and we freeze it, and we take the total number of homes sold in the month of October and we freeze it, it would take 1.2 months to sell off everything that we currently have, which is ridiculously low. And in fact, it's the lowest of almost all the communities local here. For the county overall, that number is 1.4 months. The next closest to us is San Jose at 1.3 months. So it's an amazingly low inventory number, and the balanced number is typically considered to be 4.5 to 5.5 months. So we're definitely in a very seller-dominated inventory scenario here as far as that's concerned. Now, where are we likely to go from here? Well, if we look at September and October of last year, you can see we saw a decline between those 2 months. We definitely saw the same thing happen this year, and typically the inventory drops and bottoms out in around December. So the expectation would be that in terms of relative movements in inventory, we would see those kinds of numbers as we lead to the end of the year. Last year, though, we saw a relatively minor increase in inventory in January, February, and March, which is not typical. We usually see this number start to ramp up more in January, February, and March, and my expectation is that we will see a bigger jump. Now, why do I anticipate a bigger jump? Some of that has to do with just instincts of what I've been seeing happen. I'm getting a lot more inquiries from sellers who are interested in putting their home on the market in the first quarter of 2024. So my feeling is that we're going to see an uptick in the total number of listings, which would obviously increase the total number of active listings for the month. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at the new listings numbers. Now, these are the number of homes that were added to the market in October of 2023. We can see we had only a 3% shift, so very similar to the numbers we saw last year, only different by 1, so I wouldn't even call that much of a change at all. In October of this year, we saw 38 homes added to the market. 39 homes were added last year. And it's a big drop. I mean, look, the last time we had this small a number, we have to go back to about October. But in terms of what's amazing is it's higher than the number of homes that were listed in January, and almost as many as this we saw in February of last year. So January and February are typically much more active months than in October, November, December. So interesting to see that kind of dichotomy there. Another thing that's interesting to note is that we are one of the few communities that actually saw a net decrease from the same time last year. Now, we saw a 3% decrease, right? Or staying about the same. What's interesting is county-wide, this number was a 15% increase. So overall in the county, and even in San Jose, it was an 18% increase. So when compared to larger cities and the county overall, we are seeing far fewer homes put onto the market in Morgan Hill, which I think is actually feeding some other numbers that we're going to look at here in a second. So fasten your seatbelt for those. Next, total number of homes sold. Now, what we're going to do here is use this number in two ways. We're obviously going to take a look at where we're at, where we've been, how it compares to last year. But in addition, we're going to compare it to new listings and try to get a handle on whether or not we are adding more homes to inventory or taking homes away from inventory, meaning are we selling more homes than we're putting onto the marketplace? But first, let's just cover the basic numbers. We are actually up from the same time last year. Last year, we had 42 homes that got sold. That's a 10% increase this year, where 46 homes got sold. And in terms of trends, we can see that between in September and October, we had a little bit of an uptick, but we had a much bigger uptick this year. I don't think there's much mystery about that. Remember that the interest rates went nuts starting in March of 2022 and continued their rise all the way through 2022 and sort of peaked right around the year end. So I think it's very understandable to see a bit of a depression in the numbers as it relates to the total number of homes sold, which is why this is particularly interesting because I think this is a number that's just going to grow from here. We've seen that the Fed has indicated they're going to continue to drop interest rates. Obviously, only time will tell. But if we are creating more buyers, that's really just going to boost the home sold numbers because the interest rates are going to look good. Now, if we then compare this to the total number of homes that were listed, remember we listed 38 homes, so we sold more homes than we listed. We added 8 homes to the total active inventory of homes through what we sold more than we listed. So we actually reduced the overall inventory by 8, which is, and again, it's a 10% change from the same time last year. But we are the only community that has done that. And that's why I wanted to point this out. The county overall added 210 homes to the inventory. San Jose added 120 homes to the inventory. Gilroy added 14 homes to the inventory. Of the communities that we tend to focus on in these reports, Morgan Hill is the only city that had a decrease in the overall active inventory when you compare listed homes, new listings, to homes that were sold. So kind of an interesting number to point out that's very unique just to Morgan Hill. Next, if we look at the pending homes, and pending is an interesting one to look at because it's a predictor of future months, right? Pending means the sellers have accepted an offer, but escrow has not yet closed. It can take 30 to 45 days for an escrow to get closed. So anything that goes pending in October is going to close in November or December. So this is an interesting way to sort of look in the crystal ball and see if we can figure out where things are going to go relating to sales in the upcoming months. So we can see it's a 38% increase in the same time last year. 26 homes went pending in October of last year. 36 homes went pending in October of 2023. So that's a good sign of increased activity overall, which also tends to indicate that we're likely going to see a continuing increase in home sales. Now note, it's lower than it was in September and it's lower than it was in August. It's getting back closer to what we saw in July, which is a little bit odd. We normally would expect to see these numbers wane a little bit as we head into winter months. And October obviously would be an example of that. If we look at October of 2022, we can see much lower, even lower in November, even lower in December, even lower in January. Those are all trends that are normal for the year. So seeing that we were at 47 in September, but what's interesting is how little of a peak we saw in July and August is frankly sort of more the takeaway from here. But in terms of where I think we're going to be going in the upcoming months, my guess would be from here it goes down, simply because that's what we've tended to see in previous years, not just in 2022, but in most years previous to that. As each month evolves, we tend to see this number go down as fewer people are making offers in the winter months. What'll be interesting to see is if it doesn't go that way, if we see an increase in pending homes, it's showing that buyers are sticking in the market and really willing to jump in there and bid on homes in the winter months, which typically are slower. Next, if we look at original list price, and I like to use original list price because this gives us some insights into the mindset of sellers. This is the number that they put on the listing when they put it into the MLS. So the day they sign that listing agreement, this is the number. This is before any price reductions. This is the right out of the gate number. And we can see that in September of 2023, this number was 1,749,000 compared to last year's 1,339,000. That's a 30.6% jump from the same time last year, which is nuts in terms of expectations. Now, that's not a 30.6% increase. No, excuse me, it is. I apologize. It is a 30.6% increase. The next number isn't 30.6%. So just keep that number in mind, right? We've now calibrated ourselves to expectations on the part of sellers. Now let's take a look at the average sales price. And this is what homes sold for. It's a 23.2% increase. So obviously not entirely on par with expectations. We're at 30.6% higher than last year, but still among the highest. It is the highest again when compared to the county, which was 8.9% increase in the same time last year in terms of average sales price. Morgan Hill saw a 23.2%. Last year, the average sales price was $1,288,000. This year, it's $1,587,000. And we've been seeing sort of a general increase since April. If you look, we sort of bottomed out February, March of 2023, had a few months where it peaked a little bit. Those were months where we simply had one home that was priced in the $3-4 million range that sort of nudged it way up. But if we sort of average our perception of that line of increase, we can see that we've been in a steady increase over the course of those months. And I don't think that's likely going to go away. It's also interesting that this is happening in October. It'll be much more interesting to see what happens in the rest of the winter because this should go down. But given the way things are going, it wouldn't surprise me if we actually see this number stay flat or actually increase a little bit in these closing months of 2023. And then as we go into 2024, if this is what we're seeing towards the end of the year, we're likely to see a very robust 2024 for Morgan Hill. Now, keeping in mind the sales price, if we keep in mind expectations versus what actually sold, the average expected sales price was $1.7 million. The actual price that folks got was $1.5 million. That indicates that on average, sellers were forced to take $162,000 below their expected price. What they were mentally calibrated to in the month of October was that was not represented in the sales price to the tune of $162,000. All right, let's look at percent of list price. This number tells us how much over or under list price homes have been selling. And this is an interesting one for Morgan Hill because it deviates from every other community that we tend to focus on, including obviously Santa Clara County, which we like to focus on because of the volume is obviously higher. So the higher the volume, the more reliable the data. So let's take a look at this. In October of 2022, this number was at 98.7%. So that basically meant that 1.3% below asking price is what folks were tending to get. And we've gone down from that down to 98.5. So we're basically selling for 1.5 below asking price. Last month, we were selling for 1.1% over. So while the average sales price did take a major jump, it looks like what happened is homes at the higher price point were selling, but were taking below asking price. And when you look more closely at the numbers, that is the dynamic. So this isn't depressing news, I think. This is news you look at and think, okay, well, what buyers have demonstrated is a willingness to make purchases at these higher price points, which had been very difficult up until now, which I think is a reflection of interest rates coming down. But buyers have escalated the amount they're willing to spend by engaging at higher price points above the $1.5 million range, usually 1.3 to 1.4. We see kind of an interesting wall in Morgan Hill where suddenly sales slow. And what we've seen is buyers going up, making offers on these homes that are priced above that range and offering below asking price because some of these properties haven't had multiple offers, which explains why we've seen below 100% percent of list price numbers. Interestingly enough, again, one of the only communities that this number is down. In Santa Clara County overall, homes were selling for 4.2% over asking price rather than below asking price. In San Jose, that number was 4.4, and in Gilroy, that number was 3.6. So it also indicates a reflection of the expectations that sellers have had, right? You don't see a 30% increase in what you expect a home to sell for and have that be supported by reality, particularly in what's happening now. So I think it's the sellers who have been calibrated to an expectation higher than market, and this offer process is simply bringing that down. So I don't think this is a huge mystery in terms of why we're seeing this number where it is. Next, let's take a look at days on market. Overall, October was a high month for Morgan Hill, and I think a lot of that, given what we saw in terms of sales, is a sell-off of properties that have been on the market for a while. Folks that went on the market at the beginning of the hot season and then ended up taking offers that were just a percentage or two below list price and finally getting those properties sold. So we had 33 days on market. That's up from last year's 27, so that's a 22% increase. If we look at September and October of last year, the opposite was true. Between September and October, the days on market went down. And then as we head into December and January, typically we start to see these numbers increase. And that, particularly in the first part of the year, in January and February, is when you're seeing the first buyers coming back out after the holidays are over, and we are seeing inventory that froze for a while during the wintertime selling. So that's why inventory numbers tend to drop so dramatically after February, because we sell off these properties that were sort of on the market longer, and now we're dealing with just more current properties, so that the numbers tend to drop, and we see them bottoming out in June, which again makes sense given market influences. Next, let's take a look at price reductions. These are the number of homes that had to have a price reduction, and this is much higher than other areas. Santa Clara County, we saw these numbers being quite a bit different in October. We had 23% last month, 20% this month, for a 56% drop from the same time last year. We obviously were having a lot more price reductions last year, but 20% continues to be a pretty big number. San Jose and the county in general saw a 25% number of properties that had price reductions. So there's still a lot of price reductions going on, a lot of price adjustments going on. And in Morgan Hill, we didn't see a crazy number, just a 20%. My guess is this number may have to go up. Expectations in terms of homes that have been listed are so high that my guess is, as we move through the months, and particularly as we hit January and February when things start to heat up again, that there will have to be price reductions on some of these properties. All right, folks, that should cover everything for Morgan Hill for October of 2023. As always, the best way to reach out to me is at my website, soldbyrobert.com, where you can find an amazing online tool to get an instant estimation of the value of your home, plus a lot of great tools. Even if you're not interested in selling your home, there are some great tools for you in there to manage your existing loan and look at options on things you can do with your equity. And of course, if you're a buyer looking to get going with your purchase, there are some great search tools on there as well. So feel free to head over to Sold by Robert and check those out. All right, folks, the goal is to leave you with more knowledge on the table, and I take it with your time. I hope we've accomplished that today. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.